Ponce de Leon went to Florida to discover the Fountain of Youth. We're going to Florida to find some prices on the Fountain of Youth card. Let's cap the card at Gulfstream on Saturday. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host of this episode of Capping the Card. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and you can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Well, thank you so much for joining this special edition of Capping the Card as we are going to go races 1 through 14. That's right, 14, folks. 1 through 14 on Saturday's Fountain of Youth card at Gulfstream Park, highlighted, of course, by the Grade 2 aforementioned Fountain of Youth Stakes, which is a Kentucky Derby prep. Now, before we get any further, just a quick reminder to press that subscribe button to follow Trust the Profits on YouTube. Make sure to give me a follow on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Make sure to like this video and comment below with who you have as your pick in the Fountain of Youth and maybe your best bet on the day at Gulfstream Park. Now, we're going through 14 races, and that's a lot for any one person to do. So I thought I would tag in some help with me this week, and I'm very pleased and very thankful to have a wonderful guest. Please welcome Angela Hermann to the show. You know her from Canterbury Park. She's down at Gulfstream Park now. Angela, thank you so very much for coming on the show this week and helping me out with a great card.
Well, thank you very much for the nice intro. And thanks for having me on. 14 races should be handled as a duo. So I hope between the two of us, we get at least 7 of them or so.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting card, as I'm sure will unfold in the next hour or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Angela kind of alluded, we try to keep this to about an hour for all of our shows. So if this is your first time watching, what we do is myself and my guest will go ahead and we'll go through all 14 races. We'll give you our top pick and our top value play in every single race. I know Angela's got some big double-digit odds value plays potentially to use. I have a few as well. We might disagree here and there, but let's dive into race 1, which is a $62,000 optional claimer going 5 furlongs on the turf for 4-year-olds and up. Now, we both have the same value play, but I'm going to let you start things off. Talk to me about your top pick, Agent Peter Graves.
Well, Agent Peter Graves is a horse that I felt I kind of had to pick. I'm not going to have the opportunity too often to pick a horse that's run twice at Canterbury Park and is then running at Gulfstream Park. And he actually won at Canterbury 5 starts ago. I'm fairly familiar with the horse too because he's run there for a couple of years. Now, I've seen his progression from a very rank, hot, hard to handle sort of younger horse into a more mature, not easier to rate, but more okay with rating sort of horse. He still maintained his speed, and I thought that he drew really well in this group to allow the option to his rider, Junior Alvarado, what he would like to do as far as the early going. He might be a horse that gets in the jaws of a pace duel, but he's shown that he can duel and go on. I know that 7-2 is probably going to be right about what we get, and that's not great value considering the price you would normally see this kind of horse at, but I thought he landed in a great spot. And like I said, I felt kind of obligated to take him so that after race 1, I didn't get a plethora of texts. Really? The only Canterbury horse and you didn't take him? But he fits the bill, and I think that he'll be a good way to start the card for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Took a long look at this horse, and I would have liked maybe a little bit more, like 5-1, but 7-2. I think you're right. That's probably what you'll end up getting. This is a huge field. I ultimately went to the far outside. Mamba on 3, morning line 4-1 for trainer Carlos David with Paco Lopez up on the mount. And this is a horse that's just super consistent and just kind of shows up every single time out. 4 for 4 in the money at Gulfstream Park on the turf. Draws outside, doesn't need the lead, though. This is a horse that will get into some duels, but has shown the ability to sit second, third in a race, rate a little bit, and then go. I think, like I said, a lot of success at this level. Career 12 for 15 in the money. Finished a third by a head last time out at this level, 5 furlong, $62,000 optional claimer. The winner of that race, Yes, I Am Free, went on to win the next time out. So I just think a lot of things I like in this race. For this particular horse at 4-1 on the morning line. Now, the horse we both liked, and I was a little pleased that we both ended up on the same 20-1 horse as our value play because I thought I was kind of out on a branch a little bit with this horse. But this is a horse I just really like a lot. I saw this horse run at Pimlico back in May against Karatari, one of his best efforts. And this is a horse that's coming back from a long layoff, and I think, that effort in Colonial, something may have went wrong with the horse in terms of, health, but also it just wasn't the right race setup, the right race setup for this horse who is traditionally not on the lead. Horse kind of inherited very slow fractions up on the front, and that's just really not what Smoke and Jay does. Smoke and Jay kind of sits mid pack or further back and then launches late. Excuse me. So I think this horse will have the right pace set up in this particular race. I like that you have Tyler aboard, and the workouts look spectacular down at Gulfstream Park. So I'm interested what drew you to Smoke and Jay.
Well, like you said, usually he comes from off the pace. If he was taken out of his preferred style last time, I'm willing to draw a line through it. And a lot of the races prior to that have both the class and the style that I would look for to go the opposite direction of Agent Peter Graves, who wants to be closer, doesn't have to be, but I think Smoke and Jay wants to be further back, doesn't have to be. They both drew well enough. I think they'll both be decent enough prices to incorporate into some horse or some vertical sort of wagers together. Now, Smoke and Jay hasn't run in a while. That was my main crack against him. But considering how wide out your top pick might get pushed with the speed to his inside, Smoke and Jay, I think, will have some time to make some choices, which the rest of them won't. Tyler Gaffleone is willing to wait inside for that hole to appear, even if he doesn't get there. I don't think we'll get 20-1, but you will get a fair price on a horse who will be passing late. Wherever he ends up in the hierarchy of things, he'll provide a lot more value than Agent Peter Graves. So I think he is in a very good spot at the right time, where some of these had knocks against them at shorter prices that just naturally led me to him.
Yeah, no, totally agreed. And I think this is a horse that's kind of a must include on vertical exotics because, as you said, he's going to be picking up pieces late. It's just a matter of how far he's going to get. And so excited to kick this one off on the turf. Well, let's move to race 2, which is my favorite type of race, a maiden special weight, where who knows what the hell is going to happen in these races sometimes.
Me too.
We're going 7 furlongs for 3-year-old fillies. And I ultimately went a little chalk up top with my top pick, Image of Love, 5-2 for Todd Pletcher and Irad Ortiz Jr. Quite frankly, just flat betting Irad Ortiz Jr. right now at Gulfstream Park is not a bad idea. This jockey just seems to be winning everything. Won 7 races in a row a few weeks ago. Won 5 races last Friday. It just seems to be on a tear right now, winning at about a 26-27% rate at the meet. Image of Love is, if you want to look at the horse himself, the most expensive horse in this field, sold at the Keeneland Spring Sales for $350,000. Good pedigree. The dam, brushed by a star, does have a first out starter who's hit the board into Mischief, winning at about a 15% rate with 3-year-old or older first-time starters, which is well above the average. The other thing is Pletcher is quite good with maiden special weights. First time starts at Gulfstream Park, winning at about a 21% clip. This horse ran a 5-furlong bullet last time out on the work tab. That particularly impressed me because you don't always see Pletcher horses running bullets. And so the fact that you saw a Pletcher horse being so aggressive in work and quite frankly just so fast in work at 5 furlongs for a first time starter was something that I couldn't get past. So ultimately kind of went towards the favorite here, but you went with another first time starter, Liban, the number 2 horse for Safi Joseph Jr. Talk to me a little bit about this one.
I've watched the works on both Liban and Image of Love, and if you go to XBTV, you can watch these two in selected workouts working out in the morning, where Image of Love has run against some really tough ones, including Bandita, who you're going to want to watch in the 3-year-old filly ranks. She's been just narrowly losing to some good horses, but I don't like the narrowly losing. I would rather see with like a horse like Laban, even if you're facing inferior competition, learning your job right off the bat. And she passes horses. If she's a big filly, I understand why they bought her so early in her career, had to wait a while and then get back to this sort of thing. But she worked in a set of 3 on February 26th. She was on the outside. And even though she got going quick enough, she really started to get in gear a little bit later into the work. So I thought that 7 furlongs might be more up her alley than some of her other competition who have either shown a lot of speed right away or have had good gate works, like Back to Gridlock. And she was bought for 10 times her sire Stud Fee, who isn't, the most commercially viable one out there, has put some useful racehorses on the track, but could provide value in that respect alone. People are going to look at the fact that this is the mare's first foal and that he is so low percentage first out, and may not take a look at the individual who has shown a bit more than I'm sure her sisters and brothers have in that respect. Now, you do have works to go on. You get an inside post. Those were 2 knocks against her, but I thought that they might even boost her price up past the 5-1 morning line. And all things considered, you can poke some holes in a lot of the firsters in here. I wasn't impressed by any of the horses who have started enough to take them over some of these horses who have shown ability in the morning. So I'm hoping for maybe 6-1 on her. I did take Image of Love second. You outlined her resume perfectly. She has a lot going for her, except for the price. So
Yep.
if I'm going to take a first time starter, I'm going to try to take a swing and hope that Laban breaks as well as she did in that February 26th work and maybe pull a mild upset. It would be very mild at that. Of the
Yeah.
starters that have gone, I used just Catherine in there, but Liban was my top pick. And I think that she would probably be the value play for that matter as well.
Yeah, and so you also have the horse Millennium Park, which I'm interested in you talking about because this is a horse I'm glad you selected as a potential value play because she's on the rail, which was kind of my concern, but there's something there with this filly. At 5-1, I'm not entirely sure about the price, but what are your thoughts on this horse?
She has some ground to make up on just Catherine.
Hmm.
So I took her fourth in my selections, but I thought she'd be the value play in here because I think she might even be double her morning line.
Yeah.
But she can pass, and she has to do better in the start than she did last time. She broke really slow, and when you do that on the rail, your races might as well be over from there. But she
Yeah.
didn't give up. She passed a few. They were a long way behind the top three, but that all again leads to value.
Yeah.
And there's more to look for in a daughter of Curlin than in her first start. So perhaps with 7 furlongs, perhaps with that one behind her, we see a step forward. That might not be good enough to win, but could be good enough to be in the mix at a price.
Yeah, I think a great point, and it's important to point out she broke from the inside rail in that debut as well. And so again, having kind of the repeated effort, having the experience of breaking from the inside rail might be beneficial. I think the extra furlong absolutely is going to be what she wants. So glad you brought this one up. I ultimately went with a trainer who rarely ever gets him cranked up first time out, Shug McGahee. Uh, but I really like the pedigree on this number 4 starters orders. This is a filly who is half to Mrs. Danvers as well as Nathan Detroit. Who were both rather precocious out of the gate. So I just like the fact that there's decent pedigree underneath in this particular race. You have a Munnings baby up top. And like I said, I know McGahee does not necessarily get them ready first time out, only at 11%. But you have Tyler aboard. He's one of my favorite jockeys down in the South Florida colony. Like I said, this is more of a pedigree play for me, 8-1. Like you, I was not necessarily overwhelmed by some of the first or the second or third time starters. So I figured, something, I might as well take a shot with a horse that at least is coming from a family that has some precociousness underneath and might be ready first time out, even if it's not for a trainer who always does that.
Yeah, and there were a lot of works for starters orders. There's just tons of them leading into this. A lot of them were 3/8 and half a mile. So whatever they're trying to figure out with her, obviously they've figured it out now, but maybe more distance. I think good things with her might be waiting down the road. I
Yeah.
see your points with her, and I would definitely not talk anybody off her with that pedigree, like you said. But I think that maybe more distance will be in this filly's future.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is just a starting point, and 2 turns is where she's going.
Yep.
So let's move to race 3, which is another $62,000 optional claimer, a mile and a 16th on the turf for 4-year-olds and up. And this is where we really start to diverge for the next few races. I'll just give you a sneak peek
Okay.
ahead a little bit.
Ready.
But I was on a Todd Pletcher, Irad Ortiz Jr. horse in the last race. You're on one in this race, up to the mark. Hard to make arguments against this horse, but talk to me a little bit about this one who's perked up big time on the turf last time out.
Oh, he won't be of value, that's for sure. You take a horse that's making this big a step in class. I know it's a lot to ask, but I think to be put into this spot, he had to do what he did against those non-ones last time. He blew them away. Journeyman came back to win, and this horse just carved between horses and drew up. I think even if afforded the opportunity to do, he might have opened by more. And I know that it was probably just rolling the dice, trying him on the turf. He has a decent enough turf pedigree, definitely, but they didn't know what they had. They found out they have a nice turf horse, and they drew inside. Now, the fact that it's Pletcher, the fact that it's Irad, and the fact that he won like that all lead to that 2-1, something like that. So I'm not proud of that part, but I think that too many things pointed to him to get around him. And if you speak in generalities about the card, I took a lot of the horses that look the goods on paper, and any time that I didn't see that, I pretty much went towards double-digit horses. So you're not going to get a whole bunch in the middle from me, but this is one of those, oh, how'd you find that sort of horse? But it looked too good. I couldn't get
Yeah.
around him. So I have to use up to the mark on top, but I wish that I could have found something else because of this full field with horses who bring a lot more experience to the table, but might not be in quite the sharp form that he is.
Yeah. Listen, anybody who watches this show knows that I am an absolute sucker for, perking up on a new surface, second time out, stepping up in class.
Mhm.
Usually you can get a price when that happens because they're stepping so much up in class. You go, well, all of a sudden this horse is still maybe a little bit of a, 6-1, 8-1 on the morning line sort of a thing. And when I saw the morning line for up to the mark, I was like, well, there goes that selection. And so it was,
Dang it.
it was too bad. But I mean, it absolutely fits the type of horse profile that I absolutely like playing. So
Mhm.
no arguments there. I ultimately went with a horse on the outside, the number 9, Eyes on Target, 8-1 from Mike Maker, who has had a pretty big championship meet, had a lot of success back at the Pegasus World Cup Day with the Tone. And Maker has Jaramillo up aboard on this one. This was a horse. It's interesting. This horse has attracted money a fair amount. Now, you could say this horse is a money burner, and that's probably not wrong. This horse has attracted money and has never really kind of finished where you would ideally want. It usually finishes in the money, though. 5 for 7 in the money at this distance with 2 wins. You're now getting a much better price on this horse at 8-1. And so I think it's worth taking a shot in this regard. Coming off a little bit of a layoff, maybe a little bit more of just a freshening, hadn't run since January 1st. Now coming back, and I will say the workouts look spectacular. The February 6th workout, which was a 59 and change bullet workout, and then a minute and 1, and then a minute and 2, 5 furlong works. So these repeated 5 furlong works, all registering quite fast, was something that interested me, drew me to this horse. I just think you're getting a little bit of value here. This horse has some versatility as well, which is something I always like to see. Can sit right off the pace, can sit a little bit further back, and can give Jaramillo some things to judge in terms of where he wants to sit in this particular race. Now, for the value play, I went to a horse that I have a hard time quitting, and I have a lot of horses that I have a hard time quitting. There's one later in the card that we're going to get to, and the number 5, Coinage. This is a horse that I've liked almost every time he's run. And this is second time back now from a layoff. And it was a pretty significant layoff from September to February. I thought the last time out was actually not that bad. At this level, it was a race that was taken off the turf and run on the synthetic. Finished 4th by 3 lengths. The horse has been working nicely. I like the turf work last time out. Interestingly enough, Cassie, second time back on Lasix, is actually a pretty winning move for him. So this horse is running with Lasix now, second time after that start. And I just think there's a little bit of value here at 10-1. I know he's got to progress from a speed figure standpoint, but again, he's a horse with some versatility, can be forwardly placed on a turf track that tends to like forwardly placed horses and tends to be a little bit speed favoring. So decided to go with him at a double digit price, but you outdid me and you went to a huge price at 20-1, Candy Tycoon. So talk a little bit about this one.
Well, a couple of points. I took Eyes on Target second, and I'm with you completely on him. And if the one wasn't in here, he would have been my top pick, and he'd probably be 4-1 on the morning line. But I think
Yeah.
you're right on with him, and I think that 8-1 is a great price. I also like Coinage a little bit. When they go behind the big board and they switch to that head-on shot,
Yeah.
I don't always get great feedback on that, but they do it just so you can see the horses. And when you see Coinage in that last start, I almost thought he got bounced off the rail the last
Yeah.
time when he was trying to come on the inside. He had nowhere
Yeah.
to go throughout that. So I get your point with Coinage. I just don't think he'll be 10-1. So I
Yeah.
tried to go for something that was a little bit bigger in Candy Tycoon because I will play speed. If you haven't watched anything at Canterbury, I don't blame you, but I will go with speed as many times as I can. The Candy Tycoon brings that to the table. Now, this will be a second start off the layoff. He might completely regress off that first start, but he only lost by a few lengths, and it was near this relative level. And Candy Tycoon didn't disgrace himself in defeat that day. If he can even get another half furlong out of it, he could crack the top 4 at a good price. Now, that's a lot of ifs, but Paco Lopez keeps the faith. He will probably get this horse into the race, keep him out of the trouble that my top pick might face. But Candy Tycoon, frankly, needs to step it up, but that's not out of the question. It was just that last furlong where he really put out the anchor. So I'm hoping he got a lot of fitness out of that and could bring a good price into the mix. It's a reach, but give me speed and give me a price. And
Yeah.
more often than not, I'm not going to toss him out. I'm going to include him.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, especially the way this track has been playing on the turf, you want to be forwardly placed in a lot of instances. Deep closers has not really been a winning recipe. We've seen a few spectacular efforts, one of which we'll get to a little bit later on the card. But Candy Tycoon, I think, makes a lot of sense. This is one where we've seen huge long shots hold on in that front end for
Mm-hmm.
quite a while
Mm-hmm.
during this meet. And so, and that always gets Pete very excited when he's calling the races. So I'll always enjoy
Among
listening to the
other
calls.
things.
Yeah. Well, let's move to race 4, which is another $84,000 maiden special weight. This is 7 furlongs for 3-year-olds. And there is a horse in this race that I'm surprised neither of us ended up going towards, but it is a $1.1 million purchase, Justify Baby from Appealing Zophie, the number 10 horse, illustrated at 5-2 in the morning line. We ultimately went around this horse, I think the far outside post perhaps, and just wanting to kind of try to get away from that short of a price in a maiden special weight race. I ultimately went with the number 9 horse, which is another Pletcher horse with Irata aboard, 4-1 on Summon Your Courage. This is a horse I think ran really well last time out. Should be pointed out, this is a horse that finally got Lasix last time out as well. I've been running without Lasix, got Lasix last time out. That was in the maiden race against Mage, who we're going to talk about a little bit later on this card, running in the Fountain of Youth. Bourbon Resolve was a horse I really liked, who finished second that day. I just think this horse is probably at the right distance now of 7 furlongs. They tried to run this horse in a mile and a 16th a couple times, and sprinting a little bit shorter. I think 7 furlongs makes sense. Second time with Lasix. I just think this horse has a shot here. At 4-1, you're getting a little bit of a better price on a Pletcher Ortiz horse than you might otherwise, considering I have a feeling the 10 is going to take a lot of money just because people are going to see the price tag, see the connections, and maybe go that direction. But I'm interested. You ultimately went with the number 7, Let It Ride, which is maybe the best name you can have in horse racing, one of my favorite all-time movies. And so what drew you to this 12-1 horse for George Weaver?
His workouts. This is one of the XBTV ones that I've watched. And Let It Ride was very impressive in this work, not just in the time. Yes, it was a bullet. It was only out of 7. That's fine. But it's how he did it. Now, there were 2 horses ahead of him, and they made him move up the rail and they made him wait. They taught the horse to wait, wait, wait. And when those 2 horses drifted off the inside, he just exploded up the inside and he drew away at the end of things. He's a very nice, solid looking horse. And he does come from a barn that you don't necessarily come to mind with, like the Pletchers, the Baffords, first time starters, but he's really good with them, especially here at Gulfstream Park. That'd be specific. George Weaver is 8 for 24 on the dirt with first time starters at Gulfstream over the last 5 years. With the 3-year-olds and older, he's 7 for 19, and he's won his last 2 with Tyler Gaffleone. Now, the breeding doesn't point this horse out as one of those horses who fits that bill, but that workout and sort of the maintenance work since then, you can see they're not very quick. There's just a couple half miles, just something to lead him up to this spot. It seems that they've been sitting on him and ready for this sort of race. Now, whether he unfolds it that way, the way that he did in the morning, is always the question. But you are going to get a healthy price. I would say maybe anywhere from 8 to 12 to 1. And if you're going to take on firsters like Illustrated and Carstone and Scotland, who are all going to take a lot of money their way, why not look at this horse? Because in any other field, maybe even any other day, he wouldn't be this price. But because he is thrown into this deep water, I think you might get him at the best price that you will in a while.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned Carson. So talk a little bit about this other value play that you have at 12-1. Also, another firster for Safi Joseph, who is turning out firsters at, I think, a 21% winning clip. So always a good trainer to go to in that direction. But what drew you to this particular horse?
Ooh, he's a big dude. So, yeah, if you're going to look at him, he's a big horse. That's why they had to wait until he was 3. He's got 24 works in total. I know there's only so much you can do with a horse in the morning, but they've worked him inside. They've worked him outside. They've worked him with a number of other horses. The Iceman Runneth is one. Imanra. The one that caught my eye was on January 21st. There's another nice unraced horse that he has named Starting on a High Note. And he beat him pretty fair and square. This horse is just very solid. Now, he also has an 8% first time out sire, and this is the first foal out of Somerset. So these 2 kind of come from the same mold, but I think just by virtue of it's Safi Joseph, and people will bet him at Gulfstream as opposed to George Weaver. I mean, they'll bet him, but not quite as steadily as Safi Joseph. These 2 fit the same sort of bill to me. They're both 12-1 on the morning line, but I did give the slight edge to Let It Ride because of that 3-horse work. And because of his numbers with this specific sort of starter. I think that both of these horses might want even more distance than they're handed today. But if you like one, you got to like the other a little bit. So, yeah, I use them both in my top 4, and I really like Let It Ride.
Yeah. No arguments here. For my value play, another kind of pedigree play, to be honest. I went to the number 5 Scotland, 9-2 in the morning line for Bill Mott, who is winning a whole lot of things right now, whether it's in Gulfstream Park, whether it's over in Saudi Arabia with Elite Power and nearly winning with Costa Creed. But this is a horse first time out underneath. I mean, just tremendous pedigree from Gemswick Park, who is 4 for 4 hitting the board with first time starters with 2 winners. So there's a lot of precocity in this particular family. And you have to like that. The good magic as well. Now, this is a limited sample size, but among the 8 runners who Good Magic has had debut at 3 or older, 3 of them have won. So you've got a 38% winning rate among 3 and older. Again, small sample size, we'll see. But there's pedigree to suggest this horse should be ready to fire, and the works back it up. There's several bullet works when you look at the workout tab. I think you're right. This horse probably will attract some more attention and money because Mott is on quite a roll, because people will see the bullet works. But there's only so much money to go around in this race, and I think there's other horses that are going to get it as well. So it'll be interesting to see who ends up. These maiden special weights sometimes are very fascinating to see where money ends up going at the last second. And it can really kind of make the board a little bit wonky. And so sometimes horses that might look like value in the morning end up not being value and vice versa. So never know how it's going to turn out. But those are my top 2 for the race 4. But let's move on to race 5, which is the first stakes race on the card. And there's many more to come, but it is the Colonel Liam Stakes, which is a listed stakes race going a mile on the turf for 3-year-olds. We both had the same value play, which we'll get to in a second, but I'm interested in Bluebirds over at 12-1 for Safi Joseph, your top pick. Talk to me about this one.
Yeah, I guess he would be my value play too. Look at him, I'm like, oh, who else do I take? But Bluebird's over is going to make his first start as a 3-year-old. So there's some questions to be answered. But he's another one, kind of like Let It Ride. If I like him, I think that this is the time I'm going to get the best price on him. He started off his career very impressively. He wasn't the easiest to handle in his debut. He broke from the 12 hole, but he put a few lengths on that field right away. And when they went up to Canada and ran him in the Gray Stakes, they asked him to move off the pace. And even though he just obliged to it, he wasn't willing to go back to last. He's been doing that in his morning workouts too. They've been asking this horse to listen more to the rider, at least from the looks of it. And he hasn't always wanted to pass, but in that last work that he did put in against Blind Spot, I think this horse really flipped it on and he got it. He needs to get to the outside and he needs to pass when it is time to pass. Now, I didn't see an overwhelming amount of speed in here. Dude in Colorado and Boppy O made life difficult on each other, possibly setting it up for this horse. And I thought that he would be in a very good spot. Now, can he handle the turf? Is he as good at 3? These are all questions that lead to that price. So I thought he was worth taking a gamble on, but the raw talent is here. And I think that this horse will run as far as they ask him to. So this isn't the end of the line. This is just a starting point, but he'll provide great value. And as the card goes on, I don't have quite as much of it. So I was trying to keep my mind open early in the card to perhaps taking a horse like this, who's taking a big shot in the Colonel Liam. I mean, they could have come back in a number of spots with him, but they decide to come back here. They think he's doing that well. Who am I to question it? So I put him on top.
Yeah, no, I always like taking horses that have graded stake experience who are coming back, and I'm almost taking a class drop to some extent in here. So very much so like this play. You mentioned the lack of speed in this particular race, and it is kind of noteworthy. Duden, Colorado, Boppio, kind of on the inside and the outside, are the 2 most likely to kind of get to the lead. Ultimately led me to my top pick, Santorini, the number 6 horse at 7-2 for Todd Pletcher with Joel Rosario aboard. This is a horse that fits the profile I talked about before. Huge perk up on the turf last time out, breaking his maiden. And this is one that I think this horse has some versatility to sit a little bit, can sit behind that pace perhaps, and be in kind of a perfect stalking trip, and could potentially be kind of in the pocket or kind of on the inside rail, second flight. So I'm just interested to see where he ends up. But I think at 7-2, you're getting maybe a little bit better value. Dude in Colorado, I have a hard time getting to that horse necessarily. And especially from the far outside post position. And Boppio is a cute name, but I don't necessarily love the horse in this spot. And like I said, I kind of, a little bit like you, I was kind of like, well, where else do I end up in this race? And so, like I said, Santorini at a little bit of a better price, not at least the morning line favorite, is at 7-2 for connections that I trust. Now, we both like the number 4 Web Slinger at 8-1 on the morning line. And This is a horse that is coming back from running in the Breeders' Cup and ran in the Breeders' Cup, came back from that and won impressively in a $75,000 optional claimer last time out. Is going off of Lasix now, but has won before on Lasix. Actually broke his maiden running in a stakes race on the turf at a mile at Monmouth Park. So I just thought at the value at 8-1 on the morning line from Mark Casse, this horse seemed to have a lot that I kind of liked. And really, like I said, with the exception of the Breeders' Cup, that was not that bad of an effort. If you look, yes, 11th place, but only by 4 lengths. And it's important to point out, Nagarok, who finished third, was third by 3 lengths. So, I mean, essentially, it was,
Yeah.
a length away from finishing on the board. So, I just think there's some talent here with Webslinger for a barn that, has had some winners earlier in the championship meet.
Yeah, absolutely. And he has what my top pick does not have. He has proven that he has come back at 3 as good or
Yeah.
better than he was at 2. You don't necessarily see that with some of the other early comers, either in this race or on the card. You know what you're working with Webslinger. If he's not good enough to win the Curlian, he's not, but it won't be because he's not prepared, and it won't be
Yeah.
because he can't make his own trip.
Yeah.
So at least you know what you're getting with him. You don't necessarily know what you're getting with Bluebirds over. And since I was shopping for a price in here anyway, they fit both ends of the spectrum for me. So
Yeah.
they both make sense in this spot, and I can see why you like Santorini too. Now, the
Yeah.
question I have with Santorini before we go on any further
Yeah.
is the horse that led the way in the first half of that race ran
Mm-hmm.
off. So
Mm-hmm.
Santorini got put in second kind of by default.
Right.
And then he ran very impressively late. The only worry I had with him is if nobody does run off and he finds himself smashed in between Poppy O and Dude in Colorado, does
Yeah.
Rosario take back? Does he decide to go on with it? I just have some questions as far as
Yeah.
his style and if he'll be in a good spot, but the ability is very much there.
Very much so. And what Joel Rosario does in a race, only Joel Rosario knows. And so there are, I mean, and I like Joel a lot. And when he puts together those rides, sometimes it is amazing. It is jaw dropping to see what he is capable of doing when he just
Mhm.
weaves in and out of traffic. But lately, it has not been. He's been a little bit of a funk, as everybody's known, kind of down at Gulfstream Park. But certainly a very capable rider. And I'd actually prefer if he takes back a little bit, obviously, and
Right.
see how the horse handles in that particular case.
I'm with
Let's
you.
move let's move on to the very one, which is the first graded stakes race on the card, which is a grade 3 going a mile and 3/8 on the turf for 4-year-olds and up, fillies and mares. And this one, listen, we just we just switched it up. That's all we did. So we like the same two horses. We just liked them in a different order.
Yeah.
But this is another race where I kind of started crossing horses off my list, and I just kind of ended up with the 6 and the 7 in this particular instance. So Transient, the number 6 horse, is my top pick in this race for Safi Joseph Jr., second back from a brief layoff. What I like about this horse is you don't have to ignore the synthetic efforts because they're not bad. But what's interesting is from a buyer speed figure standpoint, if you look at every single turf race since that maiden, gotten better every single time out. There's been a slow incremental improvement every single time out. Last time posting a 90 buyer speed figure in the La Prevoyante. And that was again off of a brief layoff. And now we're coming back and running a little bit of a shorter distance, a little less. And I just think this horse makes a lot of sense in this particular case, can kind of sit a nice mid-pack trip. And I, again, in a race where I feel like I don't necessarily trust the favorites, I feel like you're getting a nice value on a horse at 6-1 who has demonstrated the ability to run the distance and really doesn't turn in bad performances. I mean, since this horse broke her maiden, she's finished second, third, second, first, third, second. She doesn't miss the board very much, and she's honest. And I always like horses that are honest. So that was my top pick. But I'll let you talk about Higher Truth, so I don't have to.
I think you kind of covered my case with Transient. And the reason I had them flopped is because I think that Higher Truth will take a lot of money. I don't think I'll get more than 7-2 on her. I think I could possibly get 8-1 on Transient if,
Mhm.
I wish really hard, but Higher Higher Truth has proven that she can do what she's going to be asked to do today. That's run a long distance off a long layoff And the way that she finished up that race at Beaumont was like, whoa. I mean,
Yeah.
if you or I go out and we run 5 miles, our last mile shouldn't be the quickest one. But the way that
Right.
she finished up in that race was so impressive to me, even though it was just a visual against optional claimers. She had proven that she was the goods against graded stakes sort of company. Those weren't biggish fields. She didn't win,
Mhm.
but she got close. And
Mhm.
if she continues that progress that she showed last July off this long a layoff, I think that she fits with this group as well as any. And kind of like you, I didn't look around at any of the favorites and see any of them as ironclad sort of horses. There are some more of those, like I said, later on the card. This was not one of them where I could pick out any and sink my teeth into, especially with Virginia Joy drawing the outside hole.
Mhm.
I respect the fact that she's the returning champ. I respect the fact that she can do this, but I think her stablemate can do it just as well, if
Yeah.
not better. So I thought it might get a slightly better price on her, but I don't expect much more than 7-2.
Yeah, and I will say, alluding to Virginia Joy and obviously a higher truth with Chad Brown, it's been a quiet winter for Chad in a lot of ways. He's been up in Aqueduct, he's been winning 40% of his races up there. But it's interesting down at Gulfstream Park. It feels like he has not been, uh, at the tip of everyone's tongue. It's been Pletcher a little bit more. It's been Bill Mott. It's been Safi Joseph. And so it's interesting. Chad's got a number of runners on today's card. I feel like this is kind of Chad kind of coming back into the fold and announcing himself in the turf. A lot of his horses who had been having time off since the Breeders' Cup are coming back, et cetera. So always good to see those great turf horses that he have back on the track. But it will be interesting to see how they fire coming off various layoffs.
Right. And I mean, he's always said that his horses don't handle Gulfstream as well as they handle just about anywhere else, but that's probably more of a broad statement than the few here and there that really get their campaigns rolling here and do well. I think that this one could be a little under the radar just considering how little she's raced lately. So took her on
Yeah.
top.
Well, let's move to race 7, which is a $62,000 optional claimer going 7 furlongs for 4-year-olds and up. And before we get into our top picks, I just want to give a quick shout out to High Oak, who is returning to the track after being injured in the Fountain of Youth last year. So coming back on the same card, now on the undercard a year later, certainly hope the best for this horse and hope he puts in a good effort. I know he's not on either of our top picks or value plays, but it's always good to see horses returning to the track. And again, kind of the symmetry of the last time out was in the Fountain of Youth day and now coming back in the Fountain of Youth undercard. Ultimately, this one, I'm interested in your thoughts on Weyburn. I really like this horse. I really went back and forth between my top pick and then your top pick. And this is a horse I watched at the Pennsylvania Derby a few years ago and really liked going into that race. Didn't run the great, but took a layoff and then came back and won. So 4-1, Weyburn. What are your thoughts here?
Well, Weyburn is one you never really know what you're going to get with because you can see up and down the line. There's really, really good and
Yep.
really, really bad.
Yep.
So I'm guessing that this is going to be a really, really good just based on some of the workouts that he's put in. Now, they put him on turf, they put him on the main track. They've been doing a number of things to get him ready for this, but he has proven that he likes Gulfstream. And this jockey and trainer tandem, Jimmy Jerkins and Junior Alvarado, have had good success, even though not a ton of it's recent. I think they're 19 for 71 over the last 5 years. A lot of that work is further back, but it looks like this horse isn't the most difficult horse in the world to ride. I mean, you see a lot of different riders take some turns on him and do well. It's more dependent on the trip, I'd say, and keeping him close. And I'm hoping that Weyburn at least gets, I don't know, halfway up through the field. I think he'll have a little bit of pace to chase, but he could be in a pretty good position early. You'll know what you're going to get from Weyburn probably around the turn. Either he'll be going way backwards or he might already be in front. He's going to have quite a challenge with White Abario. And I get it with White Abario. If you're a fan of his and you want to bet the whole card, this might be a good time to go grab a soda or a snack or something like that. You're not going to make a ton of money with him,
No.
even like singling him in some sequences, but he's the kind of horse that you come to watch. I mean, White Abario always gets a lot of attention at the track, and he deserves it. He's put up a great resume here, but pari-mutually speaking, he's a little useless. So I tried Weyburn on top, but I know that White Abario is going to be extremely difficult to beat.
Yeah, I mean, Whataburger is just taking a huge class drop, obviously. Last time out in the Pegasus World Cup and now running in a $62,000 optional claimer. So you don't see that sort of class drop very often. It's interesting. The other horse that I love down in South Florida is Simplification. And this is well known, my love affair with this horse. But it's interesting. I'm glad that the connections are doing what they're doing with both White Abario and Simplification, which is turning them back into one-turn horses, which is, I think, where they're maybe best and where their future lies ultimately.
Mhm.
Now, in the case of Simplification, I wish that he would have a little bit more of a layoff because I think he's just run a strenuous campaign, and we'll get to that later. But White Abario, obviously not a great effort in the Pegasus World Cup, but like I said, huge class drop. And 6-5, you're right. Parimutually speaking, this is not a great spot to bet in. This is a race I'm just going to sit back and watch, and I'll watch Twitter explode if White Abario wins or loses.
That's true.
Yeah, I know. This is one of those races you want to be on Twitter for because there's going to be a lot of people either puffing their chest out for a 6-5 winner or kind of making fun of everybody who
Yeah, I heard Switcher loves this horse.
yeah. So
Got
it
tips.
is yeah, it is it's one of those things where obviously, just to give people a background, he's an easy horse to like for a lot of different reasons. Gulfstream Park, he's done great down there. The connection C2 stables, if you're on social media, you know how much they do in terms of giving money to horses and getting them out of bad situations after their retirement. So the connections are easy to root for, but I just do think the class is probably just too much for the rest of this field to overcome. I just think he's the best. Now, we both like the same value horse, which we're back on a George Weaver horse. And with Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard, Legends Can't Die at 8-1. Angela, talk to me a little bit about this one.
Well, at least at this juncture in his career, he's kind of pointing himself out to be a need the lead horse, which is fine if you draw the outside post. I mean, he can only get bumped from one side, and I didn't see a ton immediately to his left that I thought would hang him 8 wide going into the turn. I think that they have to go. They're going to go with this horse and challenge anybody that wants to take him on. I would think that they'd be more inclined to take back from him. There is some speed in here. I don't know if it's his brand, but I think they found out in the Sunshine Sprint that once this horse gets behind horses, he's not the same. So he was interesting to me in that respect because you just never know how stuff's going to go to his inside. What if it's an accordion effect and he gets out by 2? I would rather take a shot with this sort of horse or a Weyburn who can put himself into the race than hope that things are just going to completely melt down. So these two I thought were the only logical horses I thought maybe to beat White Abario to the lead and get some sort of jump on him. If it's a conveyor belt of a track, they could pull an upset. They'll have their work cut out for them. And I understand that White Abario can keep himself in the race as well, but just trying to get creative and think up scenarios where he could get beat. You couldn't find very many of them. And one of them is if this horse just freaks on the front end and gets loose.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This was a pace play on my part as well, where I just thought, if this horse gets in the lead, who says he doesn't get brave? Who says how the track's playing? And absolutely plausible. Here's the other thing about Legends Can't Die. Look at this horse when he's on Lasix. Completely different horse. 2 wins, a second place effort last time out. This horse is going to be on Lasix in this particular race. There's a few things to like here. You mentioned there's not a huge amount of speed necessarily in this race. I can see this horse easily, getting there. And if he gets there, then he's got a shot. And at 8-1, you're going to get a good value because money's going to roll in on White Abario. We know that. So everybody else is going to float up a little bit as a result.
Yep.
Well, let's move to race 8, which is the Canadian Turf Stakes Grade 3. And this is going 1 mile and a 16th on the turf for 4-year-olds and up. And we both have the same top pick, which is Todd Pletcher's Emmanuel. Again, not a great choice parimutually at 9-5, but feels kind of inevitable. This horse just ran a banger last time out at Tampa Bay Downs. And, it's interesting. Emmanuel's a horse that was on the Derby Trail and then went to turf and won first time out on turf. And, then raced again, things didn't necessarily go well, then went to the bench, came back, ran a huge speed figure and a huge number there at Tampa Bay. Just feels like he's the class of this field. And it's just hard for me to get around this horse. I didn't know. I mean, I know you have Safe Conduct as a value play. Was there any consideration not picking Emmanuel in this top spot for you?
No, because you try to, we always start with the favorite. How do you beat him? Okay.
Right.
Emmanuel. Well, let's see. Can he rate? Yep, did that last time. Does he like the turf? Yep, proved that last year. Is he feeling better from August? Yep. I mean, it checks all the boxes, and Todd Pletcher's won this race 5 times. He knows. Yeah, I know he's won a lot of races 5 times, but ranging from 2004 to 2020, he's won it 5 times. He knows, I guess, how to get a horse set to go in this particular event. So in trying to find a way around him, every path I tried to take was blocked. So I took Emmanuel. I think that unless he really regresses off that Tampa race, I don't see anything that drew in against him that could probably beat him. On their best day, they could maybe make a run at him, but I've surrendered. Even in taking safe conduct has speed, but safe conduct's gonna really have to step up his game. I mean, not a figure sort of person necessarily, but even
Mhm.
watching their recent races and the fact that he hasn't run in October or since October, there's a pretty big gap in this particular instance between my top pick and my value play. I really like Emmanuel, and I just hate the price.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And my very similar thoughts on Steady On, the number 10 horse, which was my value play at 6-1. So I'm kind of backing it up. If Todd Pletcher can't win on Emmanuel, he'll certainly win on Steady On, if he's going to
Yeah.
win this race with Irad aboard. This is a horse that did, I think, intrigue me a little bit. Ran a really big speed figure back in October of last year at the Belmont at Aqueduct Meet in an allowance race, and has been on the synthetic the last two times out, once in $100,000 handicap and the other in a listed stakes race, which was taken off the turf, I should say. And this horse, just like I said, has kind of run pretty honest, doesn't really turn in bad efforts, is pretty steady and pretty consistent, has some versatility to, but will be certainly forward, but doesn't need to be forward. Has one rating before in that one aforementioned allowance race. And so I just thought, 6-1, you're getting a little bit of value there. Who knows what the board's going to end up looking like, but this was, again, a tough one the gap for me between Emmanuel and kind of everybody else was pretty sizable in this race as well. This feels like a single and you move on, and that's how you maybe make some money in this race, is by just keeping your price down on your pick 4, pick 5 tickets.
Well said.
Well, let's go to what I'm excited. I'm very excited for this race. Let's go to the Here Comes the Bride, which is a grade 3, 1 mile on the turf for 3-year-old fillies. And you have some prices, Angela, and I want you to talk about them. Moonage Daydream, your top pick for Jorge Abreu at 12-1. What drew you to this filly?
Her speed,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that he's good at stretching these sorts of horses out. Now, he's 3 for 12 over the last 5 years in stretching them out off a win, but he's also 16% overall just taking them on a route the first time, regardless of what surface they're on or what they did in their last start. And I know that it was, they're 6 furlongs up to a mile. There's no 7 furlong or in between for her. But the way that she was finishing off that last race in November, she didn't give you the impression that the needle was on E. And I think that given the fact that she came from just off the pace in her second start, how quickly she caught on to things, the fact that she drew outside, and that Perez is on her, and he can get some speed out of a horse and go over and maybe get himself extricated from that outside post. Why not? I didn't look around at the rest of the field and see anybody that I thought would go up and make an extremely hot pace. I think the inside filly might show some speed. I think that she might, and you have maybes with a couple of others. But if you're thinking just maybes with them, and you know that she'll be close and that she'll be able to be in a favorable spot on that turf, like you mentioned earlier, she made some sense. And nobody else stood out enough for me to take a stance like I did with Emmanuel. So I'm going to take a shot with her, see if she likes 2 turns, and see if that high cruising speed can take her another quarter mile.
I hear you on that. And so I went to the favorite as a result. And so, no, listen, this was, Cairo Consort had the sort of effort last time out that had people buzzing about this filly, because she completely blows the break, looking the wrong way. She spots the field 7 lengths. Our mutual friend Sarah El Badwi texts me in the middle of the race and goes, if she wins this, she's Flightline. And don't you know it?
Too much, Sarah.
Yeah, a little too much, but it's the right sentiment. And don't you know it? She comes flying late and just envelops the field in what felt like about 5 strides. She just kind of got by everybody and ended up winning by open lengths. I mean, it was a jaw-dropping effort. And the reality is that it also, I like horses sometimes when things don't go well, to see how they respond. That's one of my, especially with 2, 3-year-old horses. When plan A does not work out, how does plan B work out? And sometimes you have to figure that out mid-race. And the fact that Cairo Consort showed plan A was blown out of the water last time, and now plan B is, I have to circle this entire field. I have to calm myself down. I have to get in a position I've never been in before. And then I have to go. The fact she was able to do it just was so impressive to me that it's hard for me to bet against her, knowing that she'll get a better trip inevitably this time around. And so that's where I went with my top pick. I do have to give a shout out to um, the number 8 horse, Papilio. This is an intriguing horse at 5-1 on the morning line, only for who she ran against last time out, which was Taria and Meditate, who are just absolute monsters over in Europe. And so the competition she's kept is very impressive. Now, whether she fires first out in North America off a long way off is another question. But when you look at those past performances and sees names like Taria and Meditate, it kind of pops off the page a little bit for you there. Now, I thought I was doing well with a 15-1 value play. You doubled me up. So talk about riding pretty at 30-1 on the morning line for Eddie Owens Jr.
Well, to start with, my top pick was my best price. I did use Papilio in second, very sharp. And you mentioned the competition that she's run against. Anybody that coming out of that race should be about 5-1 or lower. She will be. Mm-hmm. And I took Cairo Consort third, and I took Revelita fourth. Revelita, I was going back and forth on putting her or Riding Pretty in fourth. But Riding Pretty, kind of like Cairo Consort, there's a little bit of luck involved. I mean, but she was willing to weave through horses. Things opened up for her. She has to run the race of her life. But things were up against her last time. She still got the job done. She likes this turf course. Paco Lopez will get to save a lot of ground on her. She's going to be a bomb. So even if she doesn't run, you might get a thrill for a little while, and she can pick up some horses. And you know that she's going to be ready. There's some of these who are coming off layoffs, who have only had one start. You got a couple out of Riding Pretty. So, maybe throw in a local. I thought that they would be up against it for the most part because most of them have already lost to Cairo Consort horses that ended up in the race or not. Mm-hmm. But if I was going to try to take somebody that was a bigger price than my top choice, she was where I landed. And I had her last time at 12-1. I might get double that this time around. Mm-hmm. But like I said, she'd have to run the race of her life. But that's not out of the question. If you find horses that take a step back or don't like this course or whatever it is, I think that she might be in a good spot as well at a huge number.
It's funny. You say running the race of her life. I think back to a horse I mentioned earlier because she's related to a horse that's running. Mrs. Danvers ran that race of her life that one time at the Cumley a few years ago, ran like a 102 Beyer speed figure, never got anywhere close to that ever again or ever since. And so, sometimes, the horses just feel good on a particular day and you can do it. My number 3 horse is my value play, Malimu. This is a horse I've been on the last 2 times. And I feel like this is a Goldilocks horse now. And I hope that we were way too far back the first time. We were way too far forward the second time. Let's try to hit it right between the eyes and get something that's just right this time. Because it's interesting. This horse was way back first time out in North America, came hard charging late, and gave you the impression this horse gives herself a little bit less to do next time out. She'll be right there and has some ability. What does she do? She goes right to the lead next time out, which is not where I wanted her to be at all. And she fades late. I'm hoping with Rosario aboard, they take back a little bit with her and that she sits more of a mid-pack trip. And now you mentioned there's not a ton of speed necessarily in this race. So I'm hoping that she doesn't end up in kind of the same position she did last time. If she can sit 4th, 5th, it kind of mid-pack in this trip, I would love that for this horse because I think that's where she's ultimately going to be her best. But like I said, the first 2 times out, I feel like as soon as within the first furlong, I'm just pulling my hair out. I'm like, this is not the trip we want to have today. So hopefully we get a better trip this time out for Malimu at 15-1. Like I said, she's shown she can pass horses. She's shown she's obviously been able to flash a little bit of speed versatility. So there's some things to like there. A big price. If I'm going to pick a top pick like Cairo Consort up top, I'm going to, like you, try to go after a price underneath.
Yeah, those were my exacta if you flip them in the Swedish champ. Didn't work out so hot for Malimu, but I was with you. What? I mean, he gave her a decent breather at the half, but she just didn't have anything in the stretch. So she, like Riding Pretty, need to be on the improvement train.
Yes, very much. Well, let's move to the Gulfstream Park Mile, Grade 2, a mile for 4-year-olds and up. And longtime viewers of this show might think they're phone or their laptop is not working because the name Simplification is not there on my top pick or my value play. I have officially stopped betting on this horse, which, yes, I would take a sip of wine too. But we were both on the same horse in this one. And this feels like an Emmanuel type of a race as well, where it was just kind of like charge it. And why am I overthinking this at all? The effort last time was super impressive, coming off an incredibly long layoff. That effort at the Dwyer, obviously, just ridiculous. And by the way, beating good horses in that Dwyer, actually, like
Mhm.
that race has come back far better than people gave it credit for at the time. It was not charge it in a bunch of tomato cans. Like that was some good horses running behind him. And so that effort last time was just so impressive to me because Saez just never asked the horse at all and just had him wrapped up the whole way. And even though there was other horses kind of coming late, I just think second back from the layoff, this may be one of the top horses we have in the entire handicap division. Like it's so I didn't overthink it. Any other thoughts on Charge It? Kind of what led you to selecting him top?
No, sky's the limit with Charge It. And he, along with Cairo Consort, along with an unnamed stablemate who will come later on the card, all school today in the paddock, and I couldn't say a negative thing about him, especially Charge It. You walk right up to Charge It, he gets ready to take a picture. He's a ham. He looks lovely. He looks none the worse for wear off that February 5th race.
Yeah.
I can't find much fault in him, especially considering he drew outside. If he had maybe drawn the rail, I might have given it maybe 1 second thought, but no.
Yeah.
He's lined up against horses who are up against him. For a number of reasons, not their ability. They might be coming off a layoff. This might not be their best distance, whatever the case may be. That's not the case for Charge It. So just take your 2 to 5 and enjoy the show, I suppose. If he runs his race, he should be gone.
Yeah. But we both ultimately went with double-digit value plays underneath who are exiting the same race and finishing kind of right bang, bang, right next to each other in that race. I went with the number 5 Octane. You went with the number 1 Dean Delivers. I really took a long thought about using Dean Delivers as well. I like both these horses. So talk to me a little bit about the number 1.
Dean Delivers survived a very tough pace to him. He didn't win, but he survived. He held on a little bit better than I thought he would, and he did that from the outside. Dean Delivers was in amongst the running the whole time, and I was looking for a horse who had run recently in this sort of condition. Now, I know that there's more talent to his outside, maybe more natural talent. He's dipped his toes into these waters before because there's only so many places to run with a horse with his kind of record. And I would think that maybe a state bred spot down the road is their eventual target. And, they just, why not take a shot in this as long as they ran as well as they did in a grade 3. But the rail was just not good. I just couldn't find much value. I mean, I took Endorsed second and I took Simplification third. I don't think that either one of them is going to be great value, but Dean Delivers might be in the neighborhood of 20 to 1. So that was really the only qualification I needed behind him because I didn't really like many prices outside of him.
Yeah, I very much the same. I mean, I Endorsed makes all the sense in the world in terms of behind Charge It. Simplification. Honestly, I would have wanted more than 8 to 1 on him. I love him as a horse, but he just looks tired, and I just wish they would just put him out for like 3-4 months and just let him rest and get him off the track for a little bit. But we'll see. And this is a tough spot for him too, running up against a horse like Charge It, running up against a horse like Endorse. So we'll see. I ultimately went with Octane for many of the same reasons you mentioned with Dean Delivers. Is this a horse that is a threat to win? No, but I think this is a horse that absolutely could potentially hit something underneath. And if you're looking to make some money on something vertically, again, this is a horse that's last 4 times out has been either first or second. I like that he stepped up last time out in the into a grade 3 company and ran a competitive second place. And I just, he doesn't need the lead, but he'll be kind of forwardly placed. I just think at the mile, you're at a good distance. He's just to put this in, numbers, he's 8 for 9 in the money at Gulfstream Park. Hard not to think that this horse has some run in him. And so I think Octane at 15-1, I'll end up using underneath in some capacity in a exacta or trifecta sort of sequence.
Yeah, and our value plays were a nose apart last time. It looks like we are seeing the 10th very much the same.
Yes, very much. Well, let's move to the 11th race, which is the Honey Fox Stakes, grade 3, 1 mile on the turf for 4-year-old and up fillies and mares. And this is one we both have the same value play. I took a long look at Speak of the Devil. I ultimately said Chad Brown can't win every turf race, and so I went in another direction. But talk to me a little bit about the number 3 horse here.
Guess I'm a believer. But Speak of the Devil made such a good impression on me on Derby weekend when she won her American debut and all the backlash that she had from Europe. really brought me back to her. I'm willing to forgive the Just a Game. Obviously, she took off since that time, some things they needed to work out, and she's back in a grade 3. It's not like they're coming back in an allowance or anything
Right.
like that. Not that they could, but they could find some other spot,
Sure.
maybe a non-graded stakes or something like that if they wanted to ease her back into the races, but they don't. They want to toss her in where they think that she'll win. I think that Speak of the Devil, if her European form comes bubbling back to the surface in any respect, she could emulate Precious, one of the horses who's won this race for Chad Brown in the past. She was a grade 1 winner overseas. Speak of the Devil is very close to being a grade 1 winner overseas. And some of the horses that have run behind her, including in Italian, other stable mates of hers, have flattered the form of both of those races since that time. I know that Speak of the Devil, it has been gone away longer than a lot of people would like, but it's not like the barn isn't familiar with doing this sort of thing and winning.
Right.
So I think that she'll show what she's truly got in this spot. And I think that your top pick, White Frost, is going to be right there. I took these 2, 1, 2. It's just another charge it kind of race where I went up and down the line, and like you, I just kind of tossed everybody else out, and I landed on Speak of the Devil.
Yeah, I can't fault you for that at all. I'm going to take a little bit of a shot with White Frost just in case Speak of the Devil maybe doesn't fire coming off the layoff. But White Frost, I think, is very good horse, very consistent horse, first or second every other time other than in her debut. And certainly since switching to turf has been, 3 for 4 winning and 2 for 2 at Gulfstream Park, 2 for 2 at this mile distance. What was so impressive was the fact that she came back and won after a 13-month plus layoff last time out in a $62,000 optional claimer. And, now and saw an increase in her buyer speed figures actually from based upon her last time out. She's run against good company before, not nearly as good as Speak of the Devil, but has run up against horses like Plum Ali and Cone Lena, who are good horses and have come back to win and flatter the form a little bit as well. She also has versatility. She can sit pretty close. She sat as close as first or second or third, and kind of was more of a stalking trip. She's also sat sixth, or fifth or sixth, and closed from a little bit off the pace. So she's shown that versatility. She's got a lot of breaks in her running line. I'm glad that she's back and healthy and running the second time back. Bill Mott, by the way, 25% second time back off the layoff. So I'm going to use White Frost as my top pick. My top value play is your top value play as well, Miss Yearwood. I'm a sucker for sometimes using horses that I've seen in person, and I saw her at the Black Eyed Susan back in May at Pimlico, and she's switched to the turf and perked up. And again, fits the sort of profile I like. She's doing really well working on the turf, all those turf works. I always love to see horses working on that surface, and ran, I thought, a very strong race last time out in a grade 3. Granted, coming back off of a long layoff, but Ian Wilkes, you might look at the trainer percentage, only see 3%, but he's doing a lot. I mean, he's getting horses ready. They're running well. He's got a bunch of horses that just missed and have been running underneath. So the barn, I think, is doing okay. And at 12-1, willing to take a shot here. Interested in your thoughts on Miss Yearwood?
Well, yeah, it looks like they tightened the screws in those last 2 works over the turf course. I mean, 58 kind of stands out to you. Not that, I mean, going a mile on the turf, it's a little more to ask, especially off that kind of layoff. But she is too flattered by the company that she kept. McCulloch was second at 4-5 in the QE2, but still ran well. And Toscana Belle, the horse that ran second in the last time that we saw her, was a grade 1 winner in Germany. Yes, a grade 1 winner in Germany, but still, I mean, they bring some class to the table. That's why she was 23-1, and she didn't embarrass herself. She was beaten less than a couple of lengths. And I think that she'll be all of 12-1, because I think that our 2 picks will probably both be under 5-2, 2-1. I will mention that Bill Mott's won this race 8 times. So I tried to make a case for White Frost.
Yeah.
I was there the day that she won. She looked great before the race. And I think when I was out watching the race on through the tunnel right on the edge of the track, and she might have looked by and laughed at me because I didn't use her in my top 3. But I mean, she ran so well. I would like to take these horses who have proven me wrong and put them on top. But these 3 were it for me. So I think the 3, 4, and 8, however you want to mix them around, you can make a case for each one of them, and you can punch holes in each of them. But I think that there's legitimate reasons for each of them. And I totally see your point. I probably should have put White Frost on top, but I didn't. I didn't. Speak of the Devil just stood out to me. I'm making all these cases for White Frost, but I still took her second.
Yeah. No, hey, I Trust me, I've done that many, many times. Where I'm just like, it's funny. Sometimes I have a lot of friends who are not into horse racing, and I'll sit there and I'll, kind of take them to the track sometimes, and I'll talk to them about horses. And I'm like halfway through explaining a race to them, and I'm like, why did I not take this horse with my top pick? Like, why now that I'm explaining this to someone else, like this horse makes way too much sense not to be using. So this happens sometimes to me, where once I start explaining another horse, I'm like, oh, making the case for this other person's argument very, very effectively, it turns out. So, but I do agree. These three seem like the three that are going to end up there at the end. Well, let's move to the Devonna Dale, which is a Kentucky Oaks prep race with points going to the winner for the Kentucky Oaks. And this is a 1-turn mile and is a grade 3 race for, like I said, those 3-year-old fillies. And we ultimately ended up on the same top pick. And I think we are kind of maybe eyeing the same sort of horse underneath as well. And interestingly, two horses that battled against each other a few times. But we went with undervalued asset at 3-1 on the morning line for Chad Brown with Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard. I was just blown away with how well this horse ran in the forward gal off of a pretty significant layoff and seemed to be better, seemed to be maturing a little bit better, and seemed to have, like I said, just was moving forward. And now you're getting second back off a layoff. Chad Brown, 29% in those instances. Stretching out, Chad Brown's 32% going sprint to route. So there's a lot of things to like there, the connections. And I just think this horse sits the right trip because here's the thing is I think there's a fair amount of speed. And I think in particular, the 3 and the 10 may try to wear each other out a little bit up front. And now going a new distance at a mile, I'm going to use undervalued asset who should sit kind of right behind the two of them and hopefully have something late. And so that's why I went with her as my top pick. Interested in your thoughts on this one.
Well, I'm interested to see between Red Carpet Ready and Undervalued Asset, those 1-2 finishers in the forward gal, where the distance line evens them up. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to guess that it's around a mile. I think that Undervalued Asset it is probably the most talented one in this group when it comes to longer distances, or maybe just overall. But at 7 furlongs, Red Carpet Ready was the better filly. She stayed a bit closer. She outfinished Undervalued Asset. They were both laid off for a while, but I think that this might level the playing field for them. And I thought maybe Red Carpet Ready just looked a touch more sharp that day. Undervalued Asset ran great, but she got beat. I think that going the mile, we'll find out if that truly does level the playing field between them, or if maybe a mile and an eighth will do it. This is a questionable one for me, but I thought that she might be slightly higher on the board than Red Carpet Ready. I don't have them separated by much, but that's the question for me. Where do they even up? Now, Atomically, you mentioned was the value play for me in here because I think she might get let go. She was frankly disappointing in the forward gal. She had been training very forwardly. She didn't run bad in the juvenile fillies, but she had really made a nice impression at Gulfstream. Now, the difference I thought between her and Lynx was the distance preferences. I think Lynx might want to go shorter. I think Atomically might want to go longer in the long run. That's a lot of long, sorry. But just drawing the inside and having Perez on board, who was aboard her for the first 3 starts, I think she might be more involved in the pace too, and she might run better as a result.
Yeah, Lynx, I think the mile is kind of the max for her. I don't think doing 2 turns is a no-go for her, and that's pretty obvious, I think. But I thought at a 1-turn mile, this was kind of the max. I thought there might be a fair amount of pace in this race. Lynx is going to kind of come running late. This is a horse, am I going to use her as a win candidate or anything like that? No. I'm going to use her underneath in vertical exotics, probably more of a trifecta kind of a horse to close out, maybe make it a little bit more valuable underneath. But I think you'll get 12-1 on a horse like Lynx. So you'll get a good price because people are going to remember that effort from Red Carpet Ready last time out, undervalued asset. I think those horses are going to attract the most amount of money. It will be interesting to see who ends up kind of being the favorite. I do think a horse like Atomically, who I was very high on, was actually, I think, maybe my top pick last time in the forward gal. Really like that horse a lot. And you're right, disappointing effort. And I think people are willing to kind of maybe go back to that horse one more time, see what she has, and give her another shot because she was so impressive in those first 3 wins down at Gulfstream Park. But should shape up for a really exciting race. And as much as we've been talking about the Derby, the Oaks picture is equally as kind of muddied right now. There's not kind of, I was making a point earlier this week on another video. At this time last year, Kathleen O was running through competition at Gulfstream Park. Echo Zulu was the reigning Phillies champion. Nest had just debuted in the Suncoast and put everybody on notice. And Secret Oath was about to start running with the boys. and
Right.
you had these kind of four huge fillies that everybody in horse racing was super excited about. There's a lot of fillies that I'm excited about, but it's interesting. There's not been those wow moments, kind of like we've talked about with the Derby Trail a little bit. Those wow moments have maybe been lacking. So, always excited to see, is this another potential wow moment? Does a horse like Undervalued Asset take a step forward with the more distance? Does Red Carpet Ready hold on? It'll be an interesting one to see for sure. So let's move on to the penultimate race on the card, which is a grade 2 going a mile and 3/8 on the turf. Nothing makes me happier than doing marathon on the turf. And this is one where, and I say that somewhat facetiously, but it is
Same.
yeah, it just makes me think of like all the like incredibly slow New York turf racing whenever I just see like turf marathons. And so I'm like, oh, can we carve out a 52-second opening half? We'll see.
I know who you've had these
So,
chats with.
but ultimately, this one I think is an interesting race. Astronaut was your top pick. I'm interested in hearing you talk about him because he's coming off a little bit of a layoff. He's super talented. I'm going to try to beat him, but I'm interested in what your argument was for Astronaut.
Well, okay, so I've always been an astronaut fan, and
Mm-hmm.
typically I'm following California.
Mm-hmm.
Since I was a wee degenerate, I've loved watching California racing, and I've been a fan of astronauts for quite a
Yeah.
while. And I'm used to, when I watch astronaut, I'm used to getting value. You know, you get 67 to
Yeah.
1, you get
Yeah.
15 to 1. You've got some really good prices on him. And then I'm looking because I'm handicapping without the morning line, and the person I'm handicapping goes, I would guess about a 3 to 1 favorite. You're right. I just, it doesn't even come to mind that this horse is going to be the favorite, but he is.
Yeah.
And I think with his style, with his aptitude for running this long on turf, how
Mm-hmm.
often he's done it against this kind of company, win or
Mm-hmm.
lose, he's always shown enough and had enough fitness and really put enough into his races and apparently his workouts where this is where they're keeping him, that this is where they think he belongs.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think he'll get a wire to wire trip like last time? No, but I don't think he needs it.
Yep.
And I think that with the relative lack of speed outside of Aban, I think
Mm-hmm.
he might fall into a really good trip. You know, he's not going to have to use himself from the 12 horse or from the 12 hole like that horse to go over and get to the rail. He's just going to probably go straight to his outside. And if Aban doesn't go on with it, and Aban sometimes I've been told is a little too high energy and a little hard to restrain for his own good, just has no interest in rating until further notice. I think Astronaut might sit second and just
Yeah.
inherit things and may the best horse win late, but he's in a really good spot. You know,
Yeah.
I don't like the fact that he hasn't run in a while, but Tom Albertrani's won this race a couple of times.
Yep.
Maybe that'll help his price because they just don't seem to bet him that much down here.
Mm-hmm.
But I unfortunately took another favorite. Isn't that fun?
No, listen, I remember last year at Pegasus Day, I think that we officially renamed Gulfstream Chalkstream. I mean, on these big days, it can get very, very chalky
Yeah.
up top. And that just, listen, it's not just Gulfstream. It happens in a lot of cards across the country on big days in particular. And this is one where if you know California racing, then you know my top pick as well, Masterpiece, who's run out in California for quite a while and now has just recently shifted barns to run for Safi Joseph Jr. with Tyler Gaffley on a board. I thought the last time out was not that bad. Pegasus World Cup Turf Invitational, yes, finished 7th, but only by 3 lengths, made up a ton of ground late. And this horse, you know, if you look at that running line, is a deep closer. You mentioned the lack of speed in this particular race. Masterpiece doesn't have to be a deep closer, though. Has, you know, sat mid-pack, particularly if you look at that Del Mar handicap, which was the same distance, sat kind of mid-pack in that race and then moved, finished just second by a head to Gold Phoenix. Has some good races to run back to, I feel like. And Safi is doing pretty well, actually, winning 24% first time off the trainer change. I just think this horse is pretty consistent at 5 to 1. I think you're getting a little bit of value if for some reason Astronaut stumbles a little bit and maybe is just a little rusty off the bench. I think Masterpiece, who got maybe knocked some of that rust off last time out, makes a little bit of sense at a price. You went to a very hot barn on the turf for Mike Maker with Wicked Fast. I'm not from Boston, but I do like this horse quite a bit. So talk to me about this 10 to 1 long shot as your value play.
Well, the McKnight is a race I believe that Mike Maker owns. So
yes,
I did take Red Knight that day, but this horse didn't run bad in defeat. He got a very wide trip that day. Problem is, he'll get a very wide trip again if he doesn't
Hmm.
manage to tuck in from that 12 hole. But Castellano's been riding well at the meet. I thought that he might be able to get this horse a touch more involved like he was two back when he finished second. That should aid his cause. And if he just follows Yvonne and he just goes and clears the way,
Yeah.
maybe he does sit close. Maybe he sits a similar trip as Astronaut. That's why I took them 1-2. But he's got more working against him, even just from the post, let alone some of the horses that he's run against and who have beat him lately. But he
Mhm.
will be, the price will be right. So I'm
Yeah.
interested in him as more of an underneath player. I think if he won, a lot of things, a lot more things would have to break his way than Astronauts or even Masterpieces. So I
Yeah.
would use him underneath, but he'll be a healthy price.
Yeah. So I went to another Mike Maker horse as my value play, which is not a ton of value. It was value engineering at 6-1. And that outside post was definitely something that concerned me a little bit. I didn't love. It's interesting on the one race that was taken off the turf, two back for value engineering, flashed a little bit of speed. So it showed the ability to kind of get, sitting second or third in a trip. So in this field where there's not a ton of speed, you mentioned a bond, maybe one or two others, but could and crossing clear and kind of sit no more, you hope no more than two wide going to that first turn just to save some ground. But value engineering, I just think is an interesting horse who, again, kind of runs pretty well these last couple of times out and seems to have taken to going this marathon distance. Had been running kind of more a mile and an eighth races, and last few times going a mile and 5/8 and then a mile and a half has really turned in the better two performances in recent races for him. So 6-1 is not a huge price. I hope maybe it floats up a little bit. Probably won't, but I kind of felt the same thing about Astronaut that you did. I really wanted that horse to be like 6-1 because I'm used to seeing that on the morning line for Astronaut. But we'll see. I mean, these kind of turf marathons, I always find to be very difficult to handicap, and sometimes it just comes down to how the break goes and who ends up kind of saving the most ground going around the first and second turns, and who ends up being wide the whole way around. So we will see in this race. But let's go to the aforementioned race, the Fountain of Youth, the Grade 2 Kentucky Derby Prep, 50 points to the winner, virtually guaranteeing a spot in the Kentucky Derby. Mile and a 16th. We're still going 8.5 furlongs for the 3-year-olds. And we should mention that this race features the return of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Champion Forte, as well as the return of the Grade 1 Champagne Stakes champion Blazing Sevens. We are going to neither horse in this particular race. I think Forte is an outstanding horse. I think Forte, that stretch run with Loggins was the best thing I saw from 2-year-olds last year in the Breeders' Cup, in the Breeders' Futurity. The way he blew by Cave Rock, I thought was super impressive in the Breeders' Cup. But ultimately, Forte's goal is not to win the Fountain of Youth. Forte's goal is to win the Kentucky Derby. And so I don't know how all the way cranked up Forte is going to be for this particular race, and I'm willing to take a shot against him in this spot. And I'm going to take a Shug McGahee horse. We talked about different trainers winning this race. Shug McGahee, I think, has won this race 3 times in the last 10 years. I'm going to use General Jim, who is a horse who is coming off an impressive effort in the Grade 3 Swale at only 7 furlongs. But this horse has done the distance before, has run a mile and a 16th twice, and won twice on the turf, actually. So I know this horse can handle the distance, has the inside rail, has flashed enough speed to suggest that it won't get shuffled back and won't get kind of a bad trip from that inside rail. I'm hoping this horse kind of sits second flight. There's not a ton of speed in this race, which I think we're going to touch on here in a second with our value play. But I ultimately thought General Jim is a horse that seems to be peaking at the right time and is in really solid form for a trainer who I trust down there. And Louis Size on the mount, always dangerous, I think, in these big races. So I ultimately went with General Jim. But you went with the winner of the Holy Bull, Rocket Can. I think a really great horse. I think actually we might end up getting better value from this horse than our value play. We'll see how it ends up playing out. But talk to me a little bit about this horse, who I really like a lot. I think is really cool and hopefully takes a step forward.
There you go. You kind of led me into my point. You see a lot of these horses that have taken giant steps forward, whether you're a buyer's person, whether you're a time form person, whatever you use, they've taken giant steps forward very recently. Now, Rocket Can didn't do that. He came back at sort of the same level where we last saw him as a 2-year-old. But if they can all do it, why can't he? I mean, frankly, he needs to run faster if he's going to beat Forte. He
Yeah.
wasn't fast enough in the Holy Bull, but he got the job done, and he did so with a fairly wide journey close to the pace. He might get a similar setup in here, but my main reason, I guess, for not going with Forte, who is the horse to beat? I have to ask you, do you think Forte will be odds on?
Oh, the odds on favorite?
Hmm.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think he'll be under, I think he might be under even money. I mean, I think people love betting a favorite sometimes in these big races.
Oh, no.
So yeah.
Yeah, if you do think that he'll be odds on, there aren't many Pletcher horses who have run in 3-year-old races at Gulfstream who have gone off at odds on. Surprisingly, there have only been
Hmm.
5 over the last 5 years who have been odds on in a 3-year-old race in graded stakes. That is, sorry, graded stakes at Gulfstream. So a Derby prep, something just for
Yeah.
3-year-olds. One of them won. The other 4 ran second. So I'm going to take
Mm,
Forte in second and see if maybe he can follow that small sample, that small pattern, and use this as a stepping stone, which it's supposed to be to the Derby, as opposed to firing a shot that blows these away. I mean, he might do it anyway, but with Rocket Can having that potential, having a race on him, drawing to his outside, why not? And I don't know if he'll be 8-1. It's pretty close, maybe 6-1 or something like that.
yeah.
But you mentioned Madge, same sort of thing. General Jim, same sort of thing. Uh, I think that outside of him, I think you're going to see a lot of horses floating in the same price range.
Yeah. And so I will also say about Rocket Can has had his form flattered, obviously. Lost a
Mhm.
confidence game 2 out ago. Confidence game, of course, comes back, wins super impressively in the Rebel Stakes. Also has run against and lost to horses like Instant Coffee, who honestly, whose opinion I feel like keeps floating every single day as other horses maybe drop off the Derby trail. People
Right.
are just kind of like
He doesn't
inheriting
have to
Instant
run.
Coffee. Right. He doesn't
Right.
do anything wrong. He just wins. And so there's nothing wrong with that. But also has run against Disarm, who's a nice horse for Asmussen, Arthur's Ride, Krupe. I mean, has kept very, very good company. And again, second back from a layoff, I would expect a little bit of a progression from Rocket Can. So definitely like that. Now, we mentioned Matt. Is it Madge or Mage? I say Mage, but it might. Is it Madge?
I think that Peter said Madge because of him being by good magic. So I
Oh,
think he
that makes
called him
sense.
Madge.
That makes sense. So the number 7 horse, in lieu of using the name, I'll just use the but
The 7. We'll call him the
Madge.
7. That's accurate.
uh, but the Madge is, it's interesting. We've seen several Derby prep races where there's a ton of early speed. We've seen this the last few weeks. This race is the complete polar opposite. This is
Mhm.
the only horse with early speed that is going to be on the lead. I feel like the reason I went with this horse as my value play is this horse maybe wires the field. Like it's just like it's not impossible that he just gets out there and sets his own fractions and kind of gets brave on the front end. And depending on how Gulfstream Park is playing in terms of how forward, how favorable early speed is on the dirt track, it's interesting. I mean, he's a very interesting play. Now, there's a lot of buzz about him. It feels like he's becoming the wise guy horse. So I do wonder if you're going to get 8-1. But I was interested what kind of draw you to this particular horse.
Well, I just wasn't sure about Madge because I think that Legacy Isle, even if they're taking the blinkers off him,
Mhm.
will give this horse a nightmare if these two decide to go and use their natural speed. I think that
Ah,
Legacy Isle can keep up with this one, but I just wonder if Madge wasn't just that much best that day. If you think you got the best horse, throw him on the lead and see what happens.
yeah.
That's not to say he can't rate. So perhaps being drawn to the outside of Legacy Isle, this is where they find out if this horse can rate.
Mhm.
And he was so impressive that day. I mean, there was a very nice filling in Mary Quay Contrary, who went 7 furlongs. Not many races later, I believe 6 races later, he was over a full second faster than she was in finishing time, and he did all the running in that. So I see why they took a shot. I think that they've admitted they didn't know it was going to come up this tough when they first put him into the mix. But
Yeah.
why not? If you have a horse like this who's a bit behind in getting started and you really want to see what you got, go ahead, take a shot in this sort of field because you don't have that much speed in against you. He can keep himself in the race and you just find out what you get and win or lose. At least you know in a general sense where to go next.
Yep, absolutely. I will say I think both of us do like Forte quite a bit. I can see him finishing second, as you made a point to. I don't see him running a bad race here by any stretch.
Mhm.
And the horse I will say that I am kind of completely fading is Blazing Sevens. I just, coming off a long layoff, I just have never been a complete believer in that horse. The champagne and the slop, I always kind of have a little bit of an asterisk next to that sort of a performance. So it's 7-2 on the morning line in particular. I'm just not really willing to use that horse at that price. If it was maybe a higher price, I'd think about it. But yeah, I think Rocket Can's a horse I plan on using. Shadow Dragon, if you're looking for a horse at an even bigger price, maybe is a little bit interesting. The other Mott horse who finished second to Rocket Can in the Holy Bull. But that is going to do it for the 14 race card. And listen, we did it in an hour and 20, and I got to say, that's pretty damn good to get through 14 races with two people talking. So,
I tried.
no, I think we succeeded. We didn't just try. So, Angela, thank you so much again for doing this. Let everybody know where they can find you on social media, what you're doing these days, and kind of what your plans are after the championship meet is over at Gulfstream Park.
Well, I'm really just hoping out here for some big weekends. I was here for Pegasus. I'm here this weekend, and hopefully I'll be back for Florida Derby. But I plan to be back at Canterbury this summer. We're going to start up at the end of May. We're going to start a little later than normal this year.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows? Maybe I'll end up at the Derby, but I will be at Canterbury just about every weekend. If you make your way up there, you can find me on the third floor. I'm the loud one, and I will be on there with Kevin, with Paul, the regular crew. All the band's going to get back together at the end of May. So that's the next step after this, hopefully. My only social media that I'm on is Twitter, and I'm at Angela Hermann 15. If you find me on Facebook, I say this seriously because it's happened. If you see me on Facebook, if you see me on Instagram, that's not me. So don't bother with that. If you really want to get in touch with me, tell me how awful my picks were. That's the way to do it. And I love interacting with people on Twitter. I just don't do it enough. And I just don't keep the phone near me all the time. It's nothing personal against any of you. I really do enjoy it. I like people, but that's the only way to interact with me socially. So hopefully this helped you guys a lot. And I really appreciate you having me on. This was fun.
Yeah, this was a blast. I had a great time. Definitely going to have you back. And here's the thing: we might, you might not interact much on Twitter, but I know I'm going to interact with you in person because I am coming down to the Florida Derby, and I also am coming up to Canterbury Park this summer. One of my two of my best friends from Washington D.C. just recently moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, and I got them very excited in horse racing, and they've started, mapping out how far they are from the track. And so we were going to do a summer trip up there. And so I was like, I know a person. And so I'll absolutely be making the trip up there. Might even pop over the border to Assiniboia at some point as well while I'm up there. So we will see. But Angela, thank you again for coming on. I hope you have a great weekend this weekend down at the Fountain of Youth. And thank you all for watching as well. Like I said, make sure to press the like button on this video. Hopefully we connected with you a few winners and some big prizes. Make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits here on YouTube. Make sure to give me a follow on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.